Welcome to Music History Monday for June 24th, 2024. I'm Bob Greenberg, and the title for today's podcast is Boogie Fever. If you haven't already, please consider joining me on my subscription site at patreon.com/RobertGreenbergMusic, where I blog, vlog, podcast, pontificate, review, and bloviate 4 to 6 times a week. On June 24th, 1374, 650 years ago today, the men, women, and children of the Rhineland city of Aachen began to dash out of their houses and into the streets where, inexplicably, compulsively, and uncontrollably, they began to twist and twirl, jump and shake, writhe and twitch until they dropped from exhaustion or, in some cases, just plain dropped dead. It was a real-life disco inferno, true Boogie Fever stuff. The first, but not the last, major occurrence of what would come to be known as the dancing plague, or choreomania, which soon enough spread across Western Europe. There had been small outbreaks of the dancing plague before, going back as far as the 7th century. An outbreak in the 13th century, in 1237, saw a group of children jump and dance all the way from Erfurt to Arnstadt in what today is central Germany, a distance of some 13 miles. It was an event that is believed to have inspired the legend of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. But the outbreak in Aachen, 650 years ago today, was big. Before it was over, thousands upon thousands of men, women, and children had taken to the streets as the dancing plague spread from the Western German cities of Aachen, Cologne, Metz, and Stuttgart to the Belgian cities of Hainaut, Utrecht, and Tongeren, then across France, the Netherlands, and finally back into Germany. This gigantic outbreak came to be referred to as St. John's Dance, though at other times and in other places it has been called St. Vitus's Dance. These names were coined based on the assumption that the dancing plague was the result of a curse cast by either St. John the Baptist or St. Vitus, St. John having been beheaded by Herod Antipas between 28 and 36 CE, and St. Vitus martyred in 303 during the persecution of Christians by the co-ruling Roman emperors Diocletian and Maximian. Writing in his book, The Black Death and the Dancing Mania, the German physician and medical writer Justus Friedrich Karl Hecker, 1795 to 1850, described St. John's dance this way, quote, "They formed circles hand in hand, and appearing to have lost all control over their senses, continued dancing, regardless of the bystanders, for hours together, in wild delirium, until at length they fell to the ground in a state of exhaustion. They then complained of extreme oppression, and groaned as if in the agonies of death, until they were swathed in cloths, bound tightly round their waists, upon which they again recovered and remained free from complaint until the next attack." Unquote. The American medical sociologist Robert Bartholomew, born 1958, is an expert on mass hysteria, mass psychological illness, and hysterical contagion. Writing in his book, Little Green Men, Meowing Nuns, and Head-Hunting Panics, a study of mass psychogenic illness and social delusion, McFarland, 2001, Bartholomew observes regarding the dancing plague that sometimes tens of thousands of people would dance for hours, days, weeks, and yes, even months at a time, and that throughout, dancers screamed, laughed, or cried. And while we do not know whether such dancing was spontaneous or organized, we are told that the dancers themselves appeared to be unconscious and or unable to control themselves. Bartholomew further notes that some dancers, quote, paraded around naked, made obscene gestures, and acted like animals, unquote, while still others managed to have sexual intercourse while they danced. Yes, this is more than a little bit reminiscent of the routine shenanigans played out in the lavatories and on the balcony at New York City's Studio 54 during the 1970s. Back then, to June 24th, 1374, and the question we cannot help but ask: what could cause such a mass frenzy? Regrettably, but not unexpectedly, the answer is that no one knows for sure. Of course, this doesn't mean that explanations haven't been put forward. Here are a few of them. Rye fungus. Writing in Toxopedia, Stephen G. Gilbert, Ph.D., who, according to his biography, quote, has been working to bring awareness about the health effects, history, and politics of toxic substances to the public for over 30 years, unquote, claims that the dancing plague was caused by a psychoactive toxin produced by a fungus that grows on rye grain. The fungus is called Claviceps purpurea, and it produces alkaloids that induce something called ergot poisoning or ergotism, which can induce hallucinations, delusions, and involuntary spasms. But as Robert Bartholomew, the author of the previously mentioned book, Little Green Men, Meowing Nuns, and Headhunting Panics, a study of mass psychogenic illness and social delusion, points out in opposition to this assertion, quote, not all of the regions affected by the strange compulsion to dance would have been home to people who consumed rye. Furthermore, the outbreaks didn't always happen during the wet season when the fungus would have grown, unquote. Okay, so as explanations go, we can probably scratch ergot poisoning. Other explanations invoke various diseases. It has been suggested, for example, that dancing mania may have been caused by encephalitis, epilepsy, or typhus. Unfortunately, like ergotism, these diseases cannot account for all the symptoms that were exhibited during an outbreak of the dancing mania. Synonym chorea. Another explanation for medieval boogie fever is something called synonym chorea, a childhood neurological disorder caused by the same bacterium that causes rheumatic fever. It's an illness that strikes children and does indeed cause involuntary tremors and movements in the arms, legs, and facial muscles, but not the sort of movements attributed to dancing mania. Besides, choreomania was experienced not just by children, but by people across a full age spectrum, from toddlers to the elderly. Still, other, rather more cynical observers have suggested that the outbreaks were simply staged. But this cannot explain the scale of the events, or the fact that no small number of participants actually died during the outbreaks. The most likely explanation is stress-induced psychosis, meaning temporary madness. When choreomania broke out in the Rhineland city of Aachen 650 years ago today, The region around the Rhine was coping with a recent outbreak of the real plague, the Big Kahuna, the bubonic plague, also known as the Black Death, which itself is caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. It is believed that the extreme psychological duress produced by years of plague, other endemic diseases, and famine, coupled with the superstitious belief that infection was caused by evil spirits or even the devil himself, could, taken all together, create the panic-induced, trance-like state necessary for the dancing mania to take hold. And once the mania did indeed take hold, normal societal prohibitions and personal inhibitions were tossed aside, leaving people free to purge themselves of their terror through unrestrained behavior and pure exhaustion. Lacking such modern antibiotics as levofloxacin or moxifloxacin for the treatment of plague, benzodiazepines, Xanax and such, to help reduce fear, and Netflix and Hulu to occupy and distract the mind, we suppose dancing oneself into a stupor was as good a treatment for profound stress as any other available at the time. We can only hope that we, today, will experience no such mass choreomania on either side of the political spectrum following the election on Tuesday, November 5th of this year. Fingers crossed. Thank you. To sample and download one or all of my many courses on subjects musical produced by the Great Courses / The Teaching Company, please visit my website at robertgreenbergmusic.com.